Welcome to the WealthStack podcast. I'm your host, Shannon Rosic, the director of WealthStack Content and Solutions. And I am joined today by Gene Farrell, CEO of Vanilla. And today's topic, why estate planning is the next frontier of wealth management. Gene, appreciate you coming on the podcast.
Hey, Shannon, thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Absolutely. And before we dive into our first segment, we have to start with your background. And I always joke that this is the hardest question you'll get this entire conversation. But I want to know what makes Gene, well, ultimately Gene, and how you ultimately got into the tech space.
Well, it's actually a pretty interesting story because I had kind of a winding journey. I grew up in Seattle, Washington, was the first kid in my family to go to college, went to the University of Washington, had a business degree, and then spent the first half of my career at the Coca-Cola Company, where I learned a lot about leadership and sales and marketing and general management. But the last thing I got to do at Coca-Cola was I led an internal startup team that built the Coca-Cola Freestyle machine. So if you've ever been to a Five Guys or an AMC Theaters and seen that touchscreen fountain machine that has like over 100 different flavors, that was me. And so that was like an amazing experience and incredibly fun. And through that, I actually realized that my calling was building products and companies. And so in 2012, I left Coca-Cola and went to Amazon Web Services and spent 5 years there building cloud enterprise software and really kind of cut my teeth on technology and kind of Amazon's approach to innovation and customer driven, really disruption, if you will. And then in 2017, I decided I wanted to try operating without a net. And so I left a big company and went to a smaller company called Smartsheet in Bellevue, Washington. And Smartsheet is a collaborative work management platform. When I joined, they were about 80 million in revenue. And over the course of 4.5 years, we grew that to over 600 million in revenue. And along the way, took the company public and just had an incredible run, building and scaling a business from relatively small. And after I had that run at Smartsheet, I realized I really wanted to be a CEO. And I was actually recruited to Vanilla to lead the company. But it was an area that was, I think, close to my heart because a little over a decade ago, I lost both my parents within a year of each other, and neither one of them had done any adequate estate planning. And while they didn't have a lot of money, it still created a massive fight between myself and my three siblings. And I just realized like what a disservice people do to their families by not having a good estate plan. And then going through the process myself, I have two boys, and we've been fortunate enough to acquire a little bit of wealth and over my career. And so doing that planning myself made me just realize how much opportunity there is to really better serve the public and better serve the wealth advisory community with tools to help them really help their clients. And that's what got me passionate about Vanilla. Now, as far as operating without a net, when I joined Vanilla, we were pre-product, pre-revenue, and we had about 20 people. So pretty small. Today, it's a lot different scenario, but it's been a really fun journey over the last 2.5 years.
Well, that is an incredible and fascinating career trajectory. And I will say I have created several concoctions at those freestyle machines. So I have you to blame for that. But also just appreciate you sharing kind of your personal story around how you got into estate planning, because going from Coca-Cola to AWS, to landing in wealth management, which is a small subsect of financial services, makes sense that had a direct impact on what you're ultimately passionate about. And there's been this proliferation of estate planning tools, which is great because advisors should certainly be paying attention to it for the exact reasons that you just mentioned. But tell me a little bit more about Vanilla itself. What's the main objective? Who do you serve? And what ultimately differentiates Vanilla?
At our foundation, Vanilla was really started by our founder, Steve Lokshin, who's a 35 plus year wealth advisor. And he built his practice really around a planning focus versus an investment management focus. And because he realized that you could unlock so much value for the families that he served by really doing proper estate planning. Whether you're a high net worth individual where you're able to help the family avoid a 40% tax on their assets when someone passes, or for a family of more modest means where it's really about being really clear on wishes and intentions and helping them avoid really painful processes like probate. And in some states, like Washington, where I'm from, the estate tax threshold is actually quite low. It's only $1 million exemption, and it's a 20% tax. Helping your family really optimize for being able to benefit from your life's work is a big part of it. And so from that foundation, we really viewed it as, how do you actually enable advisors who have not historically been great at estate planning advice, even though 93% of clients want to get advice from their advisors around their estate plan, only 23% are actually getting that advice today. And part of the problem is advisors don't always feel comfortable providing that advice, or they don't have the tooling and the tools to do it. And through Steve's career and his companies, they were essentially having to hand crank everything that they did to support their clients. And in fact, if you look at estate planning all up as an industry, it's a very artisanal practice. It's still lawyers and Word documents and Excel spreadsheets. And so we really saw an opportunity to create an end-to-end platform to support what we call estate advisory. And it's this idea of really helping advisors engage with their clients. And if you think about it, an estate planning conversation is probably the most intimate conversation an advisor can have with a client or a prospect, because you're delving into their relationship with their family, their relationship with money, how they think about charitable giving, how they think about multi-generational wealth transfer and the type of legacy they want to create. I mean, these are really weighty topics. And we know from experience that when advisors can engage a client like that, it builds a much deeper connection than what they can do talking about how they performed against the index, or saving up for kids' college. Not that that's not important, but it's just a different kind of order of magnitude. And so when advisors actually engage in this estate advisory, they build deeper connections. It gives them a chance to create relationships beyond their primary client with the next generation, which helps them retaining assets. It gives them opportunities to understand the client's entire balance sheet, and there may be opportunities where they could help the client that they didn't even know there was an opportunity, or they didn't know that the client had those assets. And then from a prospecting perspective, it really helps them land new business, because at least today, the majority of advisors still haven't become that total wealth advisor that thinks about estate advisory. And so Vanilla really is designed to help them every step of the way, from client onboarding to visualizing their current situation, understanding the implications of their current plan. And then if there's a planning opportunity, which there's almost always a planning opportunity, being able to help model that for the client and then ultimately execute it, whether it be through updating their documents, working with their attorney, managing the various aspects of their estate strategy over time. So it's really designed to be that tool that helps advisors look better. And importantly, estate planning many times is thought of as kind of it's almost like life insurance. I think of it as like a one and done. And that's not really the right way to think about it. It's really an ongoing process, just like all the other types of planning you do in your life, right? Your life isn't static. It changes, your wealth changes, your family situation changes. And you need to think of estate planning as something that you do on a regular basis.
And speaking of changes, does Vanilla help advisors cater to different generations, from baby boomers to millennials? Obviously, like you said, the younger you are, the more it's probably going to change over time.
Absolutely. Certainly the needs are different for a young family that, maybe is having their first child, or a couple that just got married. Many times in that earlier phase, the conversation is much more about how do we provide security for the family if the unthinkable happens, right? So it could be income replacement. It could be ensuring that there's enough resources for very young children to be able to go to college when they're older, or for the surviving partner to be able to not have to necessarily disrupt their life or have a big income gap. And as life progresses and people get into more of their peak earning years, those needs start to change, right? It starts to become about how do you think about your relationships and how you can have impact. And everybody has different points of view on giving money to heirs. Some people believe that kids, I have a lot of clients we work with that are have done quite well and believe that their kids need to not have that backstop and need to do quite well on their own, not rely on their parents' money, and they want to give it all to charity. And that's a very personal choice. So, but again, we can serve that spectrum from just starting out all the way to ultra high net worth.
But I also have to ask about the name Vanilla. How was it chosen? It's just certainly unique and memorable.
Well, thank you for that. It actually comes down to is a founding story, and I'd love to say I was in the room, but I wasn't. This is when Steve had first started the company, and Steve has a philosophy, and his company had a philosophy around estate structure that, and his belief was that many times attorneys have a tendency to want to include every provision of how an estate will be executed in the actual legal documents, which makes them incredibly rigid when your life changes or your plans change or your wishes change over time. And so Steve's philosophy is always very much to create a very straightforward, simple structure around a trust, and then have the actual wishes of the client be prepared in what's called a letter of wishes. So it's a non-binding legal document, but it's basically instructions to the trustee of your estate on how you want your assets distributed. The advantage of that is it gives you flexibility to change it over time without having to always go back to an attorney and have them redraft documents for you. And it can avoid putting something into a legal structure that's hard to unwind. And so he would call that, we want to create a plain vanilla structure. And he would use this word plain vanilla over and over again to talk to the team about his philosophy. And it's straight up the middle, plain vanilla. Let's not get overly complicated. Let's not bind the client into something that they're going to want to change later. And so the story, as I understand it, they were brainstorming on a name, and Steve had to leave to go take a client call. And we came back. They said, well, we have a name. And he says, okay, well, what is it? And then we said vanilla. And he says, vanilla. And he said, yeah, you kept saying it's about, let's be plain vanilla, really easy and simple to understand and easier on the client. And it stuck.
Love it. Taking the power back to the word vanilla.
Yeah,
Oh, that's
exactly
so,
right.
oh, that's great. Well, Gene, I appreciate the background and context, but I want to dive into our first segment that I call Stats All Folks. And I know you already threw a few out there, but I have a few more for you.
Okay.
In our 2023 WealthStack study, we asked a question around which technology solution is delivering the best ROI. And I actually purposely added estate planning as a brand new category this last year. So we'll be able to benchmark it moving forward. And about 15% of respondents said estate planning tools were delivering the best ROI. I expect that number to increase year over year, but I'm curious on your outlook.
I absolutely expect it to. There's so much momentum right now behind estate planning, and there's a lot of factors that come into play, right? You have this massive wealth transfer that's coming down, 84 trillion in assets expected to transfer over the next 20 years. You have the sunsetting of the estate tax exemption at the end of 2025, which essentially, for your listeners that aren't familiar with that, today the estate tax exemption is just under $14 million per individual. So a household with two partners would have an exemption of about just under $28 million. That's going to be cut almost in half, or maybe slightly more than in half, at the end of 2025 when the Trump tax cuts expire. And so that's going to suddenly now make a lot of estates that thought they never had to worry about having to pay federal estate tax of 40% will suddenly have some planning to do. And so that certainly is coming into it as well. But I think in general, wealth management is under a tremendous amount of pressure as advisors realize that beating the market by picking stocks is virtually impossible. And so really achieving alpha for clients is not going to come from investments. It's got to come from planning and how you help them navigate important decisions in life. And I can tell you from my own personal experience, I have two different wealth advisors that I work with. That's actually what I want from my advisors. I want to be able to have someone as a sounding board to help me deal with thinking about retirement, or how do I plan for my kids' education, or how do I think about my estate plan and transferring wealth to my children or to charities or whatever I might want to do, or other family members for that matter. And so I think advisors have this huge opportunity to really pivot to an area that's highly valuable to their clients. And the returns don't always seem obvious at the front end, but the returns come in the form of increased retention. So you keep the assets that you're managing today, particularly when you have a wealth transfer, because 98% of the time when the primary client passes away, the assets leave the firm because the advisor does not have a relationship with the other partner or doesn't have a relationship with the next generation. And so retention is a big part of the ROI in estate planning. Certainly prospecting. When clients are looking for help with an estate plan and their current advisor isn't giving it to them, they're very much ripe for being picked up by a new advisor. And then finally, it's around share of wallet. The estate planning process is one of the few motions that you can do as an advisor that gives you visibility to the client's entire wealth, all of the assets that they have, whether it be investable assets or homes or private businesses. But it's one of the few motions that gives you that complete picture that doesn't feel threatening to the client. I mean, I can tell you when my advisor wants to kind of nose around assets that they're not managing, my spidey sense is he's trying to pitch me something or sell me something. Whereas if he came to me and said, "Hey, I want to help you with your estate plan, and we need to understand your whole balance sheet," that would be a pretty straightforward, non-threatening conversation.
On behalf of WealthManagement.com, we invite you to join us on May 13th through 16th of Hollywood, Florida, for WealthStack, part of Wealth Management Edge. Our agenda is designed to power a new generation of growth-oriented advisors with the latest innovations and trends and technology strategies. From captivating keynote speakers to interactive workshops, dedicated think tanks, a dynamic exhibit hall, and hands-on demonstrations of cutting-edge technologies, you'll leave with a deep understanding of how to accelerate growth at your practice. Use promo code podcast20 to save 20% off your registration. Visit wealthmanagementedge-event.com for more information.
Absolutely. And I want to keep talking about this great wealth transfer because it's a huge deal. And this exchange of wealth and change in who the wealthy demographic is going to dramatically just shift the landscape of wealth management across the US. And I was actually checking out Vanilla's own study that said nearly 60% of millennial respondents reported having worked with a financial advisor, but only 38% have consulted an estate planner. And that obviously seems like the perfect opportunity for advisors to really capitalize on the unique opportunities and, like you said, deliver that differentiated advice and foster trust with their clients. But it still seems like there's a lot of work to do because there isn't maybe a lot of that trickle down happening through, generations, because like you said, most of them are leaving, when their parents move on.
Absolutely. And I think it fundamentally comes down to estate planning is not particularly well understood. It can be really confusing to the end client who doesn't have any context. And it's very challenging to know who to trust. And so, my own personal experience, when I updated my estate plan after my two kids, in fact, we did it when we moved from Coke to Amazon. And my advisor introduced me to a great estate attorney, but the whole process of, I think the first meeting or first couple meetings, we spent several hours with them educating me on how estate planning worked and the different strategies we should think about. And then I got $1,000 bill. We hadn't done any planning yet. I mean, I spent 2 hours, and that to me was this, for a lot of people, that's a very scary thing. It's like, I don't know how long this process is going to take or how much money it's going to cost me. And many times attorneys have preferences or experiences that maybe work for the majority of their clients that may not work for the individual. And so having a better way to actually learn about estate planning and then get started, where I don't think people are afraid to spend money on something this important, but I think people really struggle with kind of an open-ended, I have no idea how much this will cost, and I'm not sure what the benefit is. That's tricky. And so I think removing a lot of that mystery and making it easier for clients to really understand what's important in a good estate plan, and then having someone to help guide them along the way is really, really important.
And as you mentioned, you and Steve Lockshin have both talked about the shift in the industry around advisors becoming well-versed in estate advisory. And big news in the last couple of weeks, between the recent launch of the new estate plan visualization and evaluation tool called Vanilla Scenarios and the Vanilla Estate Advisory platform last year, how does this ultimately help the estate advisor cause? What's been the reception and how's the adoption going?
Well, I would say we've been thrilled with the adoption, and I would, in our first year, I think we were in the top decile of startups as far as going as far as revenue and client onboarding, and we continue to see week over week clients adding to the platform. Clients being added to the platform keeps setting new records. So we're seeing a really warm reception from both advisors and clients, and they're getting these unlocks, right? There were great quotes from advisors that talk about, after the second meeting, the client consolidated assets with me because they realized I was going to be able to help them actually manage their whole estate. And we had a great example just a couple of days ago. We had a client. It was kind of a tragic story, but it was a client who had a very aggressive form of cancer and only had a few weeks to live, and they needed to quickly update their documents. And in December, we launched a new document service where a completely software-driven flow where you can go create your documents or update your documents and execute them really, really quickly. And this client was actually, imagine dying of cancer and being stressed about not being able to take care of your family. And we literally within a day were able to get updated documents for the client, and they ultimately passed the next week. But having that peace of mind that we were able to help and support, and the advisor was just thrilled. They were just like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad I could take care of this. It was a client that they'd had a long relationship with, and to help them on their deathbed, really make sure their family was taken care of. It's powerful and really meaningful.
So then I have to ask, what's the biggest misconception around estate planning solutions that drives you crazy and you just want to dispel?
Well, I think that I think it's probably there's probably a couple of them. The first is that it's this idea that, oh, if I have a will that I created 10 years ago, I'm fine. The fact is the tax laws change, the family situations change. I know from, again, I probably share too many personal stories, but my wife and I did a will when our first child was born. And then we updated it when our second child was starting high school. That is not a best practice for how to manage your estate plan.
At least you're honest.
Yeah, but too common, all too often, that's what happens with folks. They kind of view it as, first of all, people don't like to think about their own demise. And so, I still plan to live forever, but at least I'm planning for if something bad happens. And I think that people, so there is that, but then I think there's also this kind of stigma around estate planning that it's only for people that are old or only for people with a lot of money. And it really, none of those factors really come into play when it comes to taking care of the people you care about. And again, small amounts of money can create big problems for a family, and maybe not even money. It could be cherished items or possessions of a parent that, when they pass, the kids will fight over it. I mean, you'd be shocked at the kind of stories we hear. And so I would just say that you shouldn't let not understanding something or the fact that it's related to your own demise prevent you from doing the right thing for your partner and for any of your children.
I would have to agree. Drop the emotion, but it's, as we know, a hard thing in our space.
For sure.
Before we move to our next segment, though, I do have to ask, with one product launch already this year, what else is on the roadmap for Vanilla?
Oh my gosh, we have a very exciting roadmap, Ed. You mentioned scenarios. We've got a number of additional strategies that we're rolling out. I mentioned documents earlier. There's a very robust roadmap of documents to support more advanced client scenarios, including advanced strategies to support high net worth with estate tax management. And then very excited for some things we're going to be launching later this year as part of our client portal. And we're actually going to provide a way for advisors to engage clients directly in the software around helping educate them on their estate, educate them on the concepts that they want to talk about, whether it's charitable giving or effective wealth transfer, those types of things, as well as some really cool capabilities for clients to help them manage, we call it ICE, in case of emergency. When something terrible happens, many times, and some of your listeners may be familiar with this, most families or households, one partner tends to be the one that manages the finance, and the other partner is the one that feels like they're always in the dark and they don't know where everything is. and so, giving that partner the peace of mind that if something happens, there's a place where everything is stored, instructions to heirs, all the key accounts and contacts. And so that's part of what we'll be launching later this year.
Oh, well, very exciting. And I'm sure wealthmanagement.com will be covering that. So please let us know when those are coming out because we'd love to learn more.
For sure.
Well, Gene, it is time now for Ask Us Anything, where I've gone out to the social universe and asked them to submit questions they want answered by you. And we did have a few folks slide into the DMs this week. So I'm putting you in the hot seat. Question number one. What advice would you give to financial advisors who are hesitant to adopt estate planning technology into their practice?
I think the advice I would give them is that it's very difficult to fight gravity. And it's pretty obvious that being able to differentiate in the market is on investments is gone. And you're going to find yourself under increasing pressure on fees, increasing pressure on relevance if you don't figure out how to reinvent how you create value for your clients. And estate planning, I believe, is one of the highest leverage areas for you to actually reshape your practice. And it really becomes life planning when you think about it, because the estate plan conversation frames almost everything your client wants to try and do in their life and the legacy that they want to create. And so, I don't think that status quo is an option. And so, you really got to decide, do you want to be relevant or do you want to wait until somebody else steals your business and then try and recover?
Well, if that's not a compelling case, then I don't know what is. We did have one more question. What future trends in estate planning technology should financial advisors be aware of, and what should they be looking for within an estate planning technology?
Well, I think this is probably a bit of well, I know it's a biased opinion because it's a business I'm in, but I think you need to, when you're assessing tools for estate planning, I think you really need to take a hard look at, can a platform support me across all the different client types that I have? Because most advisors don't specialize in just one type of client. They have a mix of clients. And is it an end-to-end solution that can help me move from the early stages of helping the client understand what's important in an estate plan, all the way through to fully executed documents and ongoing maintenance of the estate? Because many times where estate planning falls apart is an advisor will have a conversation with the client about needing to update their estate plan. And the client says, okay, great, got it. I'll go talk to my attorney. And that never happens. Or they go talk to the attorney, they get an updated set of documents. The attorney delivers this big stack of documents that the client then goes and puts in their safe, but they never take the next step to go make sure that they actually retitled the assets into the trust that they created, or made the beneficiary changes that they needed to make on, say, their 401k or their health savings account or whatever it may be. And so it falls apart in the execution. That's where having an end-to-end platform that can help support all of those workflows is really going to be the differentiator. And from an advisor perspective, nothing would make you feel worse than investing a bunch of time with a client on a particular strategy or something they're trying to do, and then finding out after something bad happened that they never actually executed it. And you're having to face, the surviving partner with, yeah, I gave it to him and he didn't do anything with it. That's just, you don't want to have that conversation.
No, you do not. Well, Gene, I appreciate you being put on the spot and your insightful answers, but we have come to our final and probably my favorite segment, admittedly, stack it or whack it. And I'm going to throw out a few technologies. Be warned, they are not always WealthTech related. And sometimes, especially if I know you, they're just random ideas or thoughts. And you tell me if they're worth the hype or not. So, stack it, use it, love it, whack it, lose it, hate it. So number one, as the brains behind it, as they stand today, still the Coca-Cola freestyle machines. This might be a trick question.
Oh, keep it. You mean stack it or whack it? Oh, you got to stack it. Machine is, it's one thing that a lot of people don't realize about the freestyle machine is it actually assembles the beverage from the beverage concentrates. So a Coke out of a freestyle machine is the same Coke that comes right off the bottling line at a Coke plant. And so it's going to be the highest quality, best tasting Coke you're going to be able to get. And I mean, how do you argue with like 100 different flavors? Come on.
Is that why it always tastes better at the movies? I'm an AMC moviegoer, so I always see them and use them. So that would explain why it tastes so good.
That's part of it. That's part of it. It may have something to do with all the salt and the popcorn too, but yeah.
Okay, fair. But either way, it's delicious. All right. Number two, back to wealth management, quantum computing within this space. Stack it or whack it in its current state.
I think we might be a little early for quantum computing in WealthTech, but if you think about long term, I mean, quantum computing is all about being able to process massive data sets. And if you look at where AI is going, and we're incorporating AI across the platform really with Vanilla, everything from helping read and abstract key provisions out of estate documents to in-app advisor assistance and actually end client assistance when they're building their documents. So it's an incredibly powerful technology. And I think as quantum computing matures, I think it's going to just enable even greater utility. But I'd say we're probably a little bit early on quantum computing. So it's not a whack it, but it's probably a hold on it for a little bit.
All right, half stack. Got it.
A half stack. It's a half stack. Yeah.
There we go.
At least in my impression, it's still kind of a quick quantum computing story. I attended a conference a few years ago with Microsoft, and they were talking about quantum computing and the fact that you have to actually get quantum computing to work in a data center, you have to keep the chips cooled to some ridiculously low temperature. And you just start to think about the practical application of running computers at like minus some crazy number Kelvin is a little bit nuts. But anyway.
Yeah, I would like to know who's signing up to do that job. So
yeah, exactly.
Well, Gene, it's been an absolute pleasure getting to know you. And honestly, I really appreciate all your personal stories as well throughout the conversation and just appreciate your insights today. And feel free to tell listeners where they can find out more about you and what you're working on at Vanilla.
Awesome. Thank you, Shannon. Well, certainly you can always follow us on LinkedIn or Facebook, and justvanilla.com is our website. And if you'd like to learn more, please come check us out. And we'd love to help you learn how you can incorporate estate advisory into your practice.
And be sure to like and subscribe to the WealthStack podcast on all major podcasting platforms and follow all things WealthStack and WealthManagement.com, LinkedIn, and Twitter. And if you want the in-person WealthStack experience and to get to meet the Vanilla team, join us May 13th through the 16th at the Diplomat in Hollywood, Florida for Wealth Management Edge. Thank you all for tuning in.